Hello there, thanks for stopping by. This is Mr. B from 15-Minute Lessons again, and this one is all about World War One. We've been through to we've done the Stone Age, I forgot what we've done then, and then we did the Romans, and now we're going to do World War One, and then the next one will be World War Two as well. So we're coming all the way from Romans 410 AD, all the way up to 1914, so 1500 years to when our next historical event occurred. Of course, a lot happened in history between them, but these are the ones that we're covering. So we're going to do World War One. We're going to have a look at all this equipment here. We'll do this one next time, this stuff over here next time, the contents of a kit bag. But for this first lesson today, we're going to have a look at this stuff here, the sort of kit that a soldier had to help him survive in the trenches. So join me now for 15 minutes of World War One, Part 1. Okay, so like I say, we're going to start with the equipment over here. This is, if you like, the heavy equipment, the sort of stuff that would allow a soldier to look after himself in the trenches. We'll talk more about what they were in a second. And then the second lesson, we're going to look at the contents of this pack here, which has got much more stuff in about the comfort of everyday life and how a soldier would make himself comfortable. But first, let's just do a little brief introduction onto what World War One was. So as you'll find out in our World War Two video, it was also involved a war against Germany, who now are a very peaceful nation. But in those days, they were led by a man called Kaiser Wilhelm. Kaiser Wilhelm is a bit like the president, if you like, or the prime minister, decided that he wanted to take over other countries, all surrounding him in Germany. And he was helped by other countries as well. And they all came together and started ganging up, if you like, on other smaller countries. One of them was Belgium. We was allied with Belgium, which meant we were like their friends. So we had to stand up for them. Also France as well. We stood up for them and we joined the war. So in Britain, we went across the English Channel. We sent a group of soldiers called the British Expeditionary Force to fight a war against Germany. The sad thing, and you might know this if you've been following the sort of news about history in the last few years, if you're a little bit older, the sad thing is that even though it was 100 years ago, we still remember it because of the trenches. They were dug in big holes in the ground and they basically stayed there for 4 years. Now the way it happened is one side started shooting at the other, and then they started to dig down deeper, and then they started to shoot back, so they dug down deeper, and before you know it, both these groups of men were in the ground in trenches that were really deep. I'll put some pictures on now to show you. And just like when we do the World War II one, it is a very sad time in history, but it's also, just like the World War II one, a good story of how people came together and tried to help each other. So let's get on to the soldiers and the sort of thing they wore. I'm going to put some pictures up now so you can see some of the soldiers in the trenches. It's quite a sort of hard for us to believe now that the people lived in these conditions. Germans as well, the German soldiers, a lot of them didn't want to be there. They were sort of forced into doing it by their government, so it wasn't very nice at all. But the sort of equipment they had, it varied. Most of them had the same kit, but some of them had a different kit for different jobs. So they had things like, to protect each other, they had stuff called barbed wire at the top, which was wire that's really sharp. It was dangerous. You'd have different tools to put that out if you needed to do that, or if you was a medic, and that's what we're going to start with. So this is a medic's kit. So like I say, it's not all about guns and things like that. You'll notice I've got no guns here, but this is all about saving people's lives. So this is actually based on, it's a stretcher bearer's kit. Stretcher bearers, I'll put a picture up now for you. Stretcher bearers were people who rescued people in the trenches. Now my granddad was a stretcher bearer called Richard Charles Donaldson in the First World War. I'm very, very proud of him, and a lot of the stuff I have here is copied after the stuff he used to have. Now I mentioned no guns, and that's because the stretcher bearers weren't allowed to carry guns, because if they was rescuing somebody, they didn't want anybody to shoot them, so they couldn't shoot back. It was only fair, but still a lot of them got really badly injured. So I'll put a picture of Richard up as well, Richard Charles Donaldson, now, so you can see it. So like I say, I'm very, very proud of him. If he was alive today in 2020, he's not, of course, he would be 122 years old. So there you go. So this is a replica pack. It's called a small pack. It fits together with your backpack here, which has got a lot of the stuff in. And these are what the soldiers would have carried on their back, on their waist. Sorry, this one would have been carried on their waist or over their shoulder, and it went with this big pack. This big pack fitted on your back. Okay, so I've painted this on here because this roundel, which they call it, this symbol there, protected you. So if you had this on painted on anything, it meant that you wasn't allowed to be shot. Under the rules of law, they weren't allowed to do it. So let's have a look what Richard would have had in his pack. Okay, so the first thing we have is this. This is a shell dressing, and you can see it's got two things in there. And the reason it's got two in, it's a bit gross this actually, is because quite often you get two wounds if you get hit by a bullet, so you need two different things like that. So that's that. We've got a triangular bandage. We're going to mention this in our World War II one as well. So triangular bandages are really good to protect yourself with. We've got this as well. So this is to put on your arm, and to, if you're rescuing somebody, you can put it on so again, people can see who you are. And we've got some little round bandages. Now, I'll mention this in the World War II one, that some of these were actually made by Boots in the First World War. Would you believe? You know Boots the chemist on the high street? They sold things like this to the army, and you got more bandages as well. So there you go. It's basically lots and lots of bandages. Now you might also have something else that I've got down here, which is, I can find it. We've got some chocolate under here. You might also have this, which is a bit of an odd one really, and you might be wondering why you've got chocolate inside a bag like that. So well, just imagine if somebody's injured, it makes them feel a little bit better, doesn't it? So this is called Rowntree King's chocolate. Everything was about the king. The king at the time was called King George V. King George V. His picture was on coins as well. So there you go. So that's the sort of stuff my granddad would have had in the First World War. And this is why we must remember the soldiers and think about this. You've probably got relatives in your own family who fought in the war. So see if you can look into that. You know, your parents might be able to tell you something about that. So like I say, I'm very proud of my granddad. So let's go to the belt kit. They had a uniform, of course. I don't have my uniform anymore. I used to have one that I used in schools, but I don't have it anymore. But they had a uniform that was made of wool, and it was made out of this stuff here. You've already seen this actually. If you've watched my lesson on helmets and headgear through the ages, we looked at this. We looked at the Air Raid Warden helmet, the Air Raid Warden hat, and a few other things. The Saxon, the Viking helmet as well. And if you've not seen that, you can have a look on the YouTube channel or the Facebook. And this is the sort of stuff it was made of. Now, it's making me itch already actually. This stuff is really, really itchy. And when I wore it as a uniform, when I used to do workshops going around schools, by the end of the day I was really, really hot. And it really does itch the skin. So this one has got a badge on the front there, and I'll do a picture of the badge as well. That's got it's a badge from the Royal Army Medical Corps, which is what my uncle was in, my granddad was in, sorry. The Royal. I'll put it on one more time. You've already seen it in the helmets and headgear one, I think. But I'll put it on like that, and he would have looked very smart with his uniform on. Now here's another thing as well. He also, he didn't lie about his age. Some soldiers did lie, young men did lie about their age to get in the army. He wasn't allowed to go abroad till he was 19. Now he did tell them the truth. He told them that he was only 17, but they still let him join the army and become a stretcher bearer and train in England until he was 19 years old, and then eventually he was sent to France. In that time he was in Manchester, so if any of you guys are from Manchester, if you in the place called Piccadilly Gardens, where there is a museum, Manchester Art Gallery, sorry, just off Piccadilly Gardens, directly opposite that was the hospital, which was called the Western General Hospital, where he worked for 2 years, and then he went to France, and he didn't fight, but of course he rescued people and saved their lives. So this is the sort of kit he would have had, you know. So let's have a look at his belt kit then. So this is his belt kit. Now his belt kit, unlike some of the soldiers, like I say, he didn't have a gun, so he wasn't able to, he didn't have to carry ammunition or anything like that. He just carried the regular stuff that you needed just to survive, such as this water bottle here. So this is a World War I water bottle, very similar to the World War II one. It's covered in felt like this, which is made of wool, so everything's sort of made of wool. and then it's got a stopper on the top. This one's stuck in after so many years, and then this held well over a litre of water. So, and there's a great story to do with this about two soldiers who found some milk off a cow that was that had been abandoned in the war. They filled up the water, tipped the water out and filled it up with milk, and then they found a woman with a young baby that needed some milk, and they gave the baby some milk, and it saved the baby's life. So that's a really nice story. So like I say, there's some horrible stories to do with the First World War, but there's also some nice stories as well. So there you go, and imagine how much that weighed. If you think a litre of water weighs about 1 kilogram, so that's really heavy. So a litre of water weighs about a bag of sugar. Can you imagine carrying that around with you? Now, if you've watched the Roman video, I said at the end of that they wore armour that was, and kit that was worth about weighed about 30 kilograms, about the same weight as a year 6 kid. So if you're a year 6 kid, you can imagine that. They carried that on the back. Now, the weird thing is, even after 1500 years later, the British soldier in the World War I, and by the way, they were called Tommy soldiers, even if their name was George, they were still called Tommies. They carried about the same weight, about 30 kilograms. So it's interesting that soldiers use the same stuff. They would carry a lot of weight around with them, and of course it's getting wet as well. And if you got mud caked on it, living in those trenches from those pictures you've seen, you can imagine it's pretty horrible, really. Now we've got this here now, and this here is what we call a piggy stick. Now it's nothing to do with piggies. It's not for bashing anything like that. I suppose you could bash things with it, but the real reason you've got this is to go with this thing here. Now, by the way, just as I'm getting it out, teachers, if I know we've got parents and teachers watching this, but teachers, you can hire a box with all of this in and all of this. This isn't included in the box because this isn't very safe to hire out, and you can hire it out and there's lessons come with it, and there's a video of me explaining it in more detail, and there's also 3D 360 degree pictures that you can turn around, which even if you don't hire the box, you guys who are just watching this as part of the 15-minute lessons, you're welcome to have a look at that. I'll put the website underneath now, so it's mytopicbox.co.uk. So teachers, if you want to hire the box, you're quite welcome, but also any parents, if you want to use the resources on the website, which are all free without hiring the box, you're welcome to do that. So the piggy stick actually does have a use. It comes with this. There you go. So there's the piggy stick. So it's actually a pick, you see, for digging a hole in the ground. And it's really, really good. I've used this to dig holes in my back garden. I did have two actually, and one of them snapped because the handle was a replica. It was quite weak, but this is a real one. It's a lot tougher, this. So you can see it's a little bit dirty where I've been using it. And it's just really good for sort of chopping holes in the ground and digging things up. You've also got this pick here. So this is the shovel bit, and this is the pick for breaking stones as well. So when they started to dig trenches at the start of the First World War, these were the things they were using. But eventually they started to use proper machines and they started to use proper tools and things like that. Okay, so that's the first lesson here. Just put this back for you here. So you would have had also things like weapons on here, of course, but my granddad didn't have them. And there we go. And that's the sort of stuff they would have carried, you see. So there. So right, there we go. Lots of sand everywhere. Right, guys, so I'm going to move on to the next one in a second for me, but for you it'll be a few days, as we look at the contents of the pack, which is things like the food and stuff like that, which gave them a little bit of comfort and of course helps them to survive. And there's a really nice thing in there as well called a Princess Mary tin. If you wanted to look into that and research it so you can look forward to it in the next video in a few days time, then you can do that. You might find it a little bit more interesting. So thanks very much for watching this first part of my World War I 15-minute lesson part 1, and I hope to see you for part 2. Thanks again for watching. Have a good week.